Professor, how do you see the future of the Western Balkans? Give me the worst scenario and the best scenario in your opinion.
Uh, well, I mean, the best scenario, of
Let's see the
course,
next 10 years.
I'm not extremely optimistic. What I think actually, and the reason why I had a graph that I send you, and I hope you will be able to show it, is showing us two stories, basically, a tale of two stories, you know. The one story is the EU integration story, which basically shows us how Bulgaria and Romania have caught up. Hungary has slowed down, but it has slowed down again because it has somewhat resisted EU and has embraced sort of this fringe ideologies, you know. You have Poland, which has performed extremely well, and you go to the rest of Central and Eastern Europe, it has caught up and it's at the level of Spain and Portugal today. So if the whole idea was EU membership brings convergence, the convergence has actually happened in Central Europe for the most part, and it is happening in Bulgaria and Romania. Romania had a very rapid accelerated growth, but it's probably going to slow down now because it has issues with public debt and etc. You know, so with all of their ups and downs, and for example, Greece is a story of slow economic growth in the last 20 years. You know, since 2004, and part reason is they have had a slow growth is because of the financial crisis, etc. Bulgaria has been kind of the laggard always, but all of those countries have converged and have formed a pack. You know, of EU members that are fairly close with maybe 10, 15, 20% difference in their GDP per capita in purchasing power today. A lot smaller gap than they had 20 years ago. And the poor have moved up, you know. And then you're seeing Serbia and North Macedonia. Now, they have actually diverged from that pack. They were somewhat closer to that pack 20 years ago, and they have diverged. And there's about 30 to 60% gap between their GDP today and that of the Central and Eastern Europe. That gap was not nearly as big 20 years ago. So what has happened is that they have diverged from the rest of the EU. So it's clearly to me the story that EU membership is the one that brings prosperity. The longer you delay EU membership, the more likely you are your economy to diverge from the EU, get poorer, and frankly experience all kind of economic deterioration. So those countries that join the EU first are going to be the ones that are going to be actually getting closer and closer to the EU. Albania, I think, has a real potential to be on that list and to be able to close negotiations by 2028, 2030. There is now an appetite to show, at least for some countries, that convergence can happen, you know, and that EU membership can be a true story. Maybe, hopefully, Montenegro will also be. Problem is that Montenegro is being destabilized from other factors and sources, you know. And then, of course, you have Bosnia, Serbia, you have Kosovo, and, of course, North Macedonia. I'm skeptical that any of those countries can join until 2030 because of all these other stories that exist, you know. And what is going to happen is if in the next 5 years those two become EU members, that could cause, of course, the outcome of the war in Ukraine. Now the things can also influence the change of hearts, you know. In fact, I think Serbian people can realize that they're much better if they bring everybody into the EU, themselves included, and that's going to ultimately solve their national and nationalist problems. You know, the Serbian world can be the best way to do a Serbian world is to get into the EU. Well, of course, that means to solve the problem with Kosovo, accept Kosovo and its existence, you know, settle all relations, you know. But this is going to be difficult. I don't see any of this happening right now, you know. So unless this mentality changes, just like when we talk about Macedonia, if they accept a modification of the historical narrative, you know, which is not only in Macedonia, Bulgaria also has to do some adjustments there. And it's an ongoing process. But if they accept that adjustment, it's going to strengthen their national identity. And it's going to open them the pathway to the EU, which is ultimately the way to provide prosperity and security for their citizens. And it's ultimately the dream of the Macedonian nationalists to unify all parts of Macedonia, and Bulgarian nationalists to unify all parts that were left outside of this Bulgarian national idea of the 19th century. So EU is the tool of all nationalisms to do very, very well and get along very well. Problem is, when will these nationalists and their narratives understand that? I don't know if it's going to happen. But ultimately, I am happy that Bulgaria is in that club, and with all of its ups and downs, is actually getting closer and closer integrated into that club, which consolidates its position, its favorable position relative to everyone else in the region, in a turbulent region and in turbulent times.
Thank you very much for this interview, Professor.